Hey, it's Dave Pylon of Pylon Arts and Entertainment, here again to do another video. So this will be another pretty lengthy one. So if you watched the last video, I was talking about the stock market fiasco and how I got caught up in that and lost some money. I put some more back in and ended up actually losing even more. And then I made it all back, and so I just ended up breaking even and cashing out and getting out while I wasn't losing any more. Try to cut my losses there. But I was talking about how that whole experience really shook my confidence, and I wasn't sure what video I was going to do next because I was honestly kind of doubting my ability to be able to give good advice. And so I decided to do this video on the subject of confidence itself, which is, it's a pretty broad subject when it actually comes down to it. There's a lot to talk about, and so I apologize if I ramble a little bit. This is all, unscripted, just kind of off the top of my head. But I'll try to hit all the major points, and I'll probably miss some. So I would just want to talk about my personal experience and kind of share my backstory and go into a little bit about the difference between when they talk about faking it until you make it versus knowing yourself and having an honest self-assessment. And I'll just talk a little bit about imposter syndrome and the difference between knowing like you're good at something and feeling like you are, because those are different. That's part of what plays into when you have those moments of self-doubt. So a lot of what I learned about confidence I picked up from reading advice on dating. Because, I've mentioned before in some previous videos, I haven't had much success in the way of relationships, and so I've read a lot of stuff on, how to talk to women and stuff like that. And that's one of the subjects that always comes out, is to talk about, especially, a lot of the old people who used to be into, PUA, pickup artists, and they got away from that. They talk about, the difference between, inner game versus outer game. And your inner game is basically just kind of your confidence. So I learned a lot from that, and one of the things that really stuck with me is I was listening to his podcast, and there was a guy talking about your confidence comes from your competence, and so basically my own personal experience. People always used to tell me that I just came across as not having a whole lot of confidence, and I didn't really know what that meant. I didn't know how to be confident or what it was. I always hear people say just kind of fake it until you make it. But that's actually not the best advice. And I kind of figured that out from experience. When I heard this guy talk about it, that's when it really clicked for me and made sense. So, my personal life, there were always things that I wanted to do. I've always been interested and basically everything, but at the same time I've always had a lot of fear, and I still do. I'm probably one of the most neurotic people that I know. I'm basically just kind of afraid of everything. So I was always making excuses to not go out and do things or try new things or learn anything like that. One of my biggest excuses that I always came up with was that I was alone. I was single. I didn't date. I haven't all through high school and college. I haven't had any real relationships still. I was kind of the black sheep of my family, and so my family didn't really want to go out and do the same things that I wanted to. And I didn't always have a lot of friends growing up, and so I just kind of got used to being alone and using that as kind of an excuse to just not try anything or do anything, because I didn't want people to look at me weird and judge me for always being by myself. And then I stopped caring at some point. I basically just thought, I'm holding back myself from living the life that I want to live, and I'm letting my fear control me, and so I'm just going to go out and do anything and everything that scares me or makes me nervous. That's the thing, is that everything scares me and makes me nervous, because I'm extremely neurotic, and so I basically just ended up trying everything. I was I did stand-up comedy, I did slam poetry, I did painting class, Um, basically, any type of event I saw online, I go, okay, I'm interested in this. I'll go try doing this thing, something new. And I've still never stopped, like having that anxiety, having that fear. So they talk about like the difference between, courage and fearlessness. Is courage is doing something even if you're afraid. It's not that you're fearless. And so, like, I come to that approach of just having courage over comfort, and doing whatever the things I want to do or need to do or feel like I should be doing, even if, like, my anxiety or my fear or whatever would hold me back, I just don't let it. And so I go out and do it anyway. And it kind of never stops. Like, people tell me I'm really good at doing, like, public speaking and performances and things like that. And I wasn't always. I just practiced and got better at it. I used to be really bad. But I still have that anxiety. It just doesn't show because I just get up there and do my thing. And, like, when I'm in front of a crowd of people, like, honestly, that's when I always feel like I'm kind of, like, most quote-unquote myself. People talk about, like, being yourself. But, like, when I'm doing something in front of others, I'm telling people, like, I'm giving a speech or doing something like that, then I'm just kind of, like, there in that moment. And all that nervous energy, like, all that neuroses that I carry with me just all the time, I just turn it into energy. And, like, it's the drive, it's the motivation to get me to be able to do basically, like, anything that I want to do or need to do at the moment. Like a lot of athletes talk about that. That's another. So there's, like, a lot of, like, actually not good advice out there. So I'm talking about, like, fake it until you make it actually really isn't that good. You shouldn't be doing that. I'm going to talk about, like, what the difference is. Which it sounds kind of like that's a little bit what I'm talking about, but it's not exactly the same. Because it is a little bit at first, but you can't stay in there in that moment. Like, when you very first try something and you're just, like, figuring it out and you're kind of learning and failing as you go, you do have to kind of, like, pretend a little bit, I guess, like, you know what you're doing. But you don't want to stay in that moment forever, because then you just end up feeling like you really don't know what you're doing, and you're faking it, and it's not real, and people are going to be able to sense that. Like, they can see through it. And people, like, talk about that a lot with, like, dating and attraction. Like, if you only have the quote-unquote outer game, the pickup lines, and this, it applies to other areas also, but this is the area I learned about it from. Like, if you only have, like, that outward appearance, but there's nothing inside of you backing it up, then someone who's good at detecting that is going to notice it, and is going to think, like, oh, you're a fake, you're kind of a creep, you're whatever, you're not really who you say you are. And so there is a difference, so I'll get into that a little bit more. But the other bad advice that you hear is this idea of don't be afraid, learning how to, like, conquer your fears or whatever. That's actually not good. Like, with me personally, part of why I have such, like, high anxiety and fear and all that is basically just saying, like, my fight or flight mechanism, like my lizard brain or whatever it is, it's turned up like a 10, and it's, like, cranked up all the way. Like, I'm constantly on survival mode. And that's basically just, like, the way that I've been built and designed, I guess. And so it kind of, in that sense, gives me almost like an edge, because you get rid of that completely, you don't have that edge. You hear about this, like I was saying, with athletes, they talk about it. They go out on the field, and they learn how to turn that anxiety and that nervousness into excitement and energy, and it hones in their ability to react quickly. And so basically, I have that same kind of thing going on for me. It just tends to happen more on, like, a creative level and intellectual level, as opposed to being something more like physically active. So I just start trying to do all these things, and I kind of learn from those experiences that I'm actually pretty decent at most things that I try, just because like I have naturally high creative intelligence. There's some things I'm not good at, and so this is where the next side of confidence, beyond just faking it until you make it, is knowing yourself and having an honest self-assessment. Builds kind of that inner confidence, because basically you do what I did. You try a lot of things, you learn a lot of things, you get lots of life experiences. Like I wound up just from trying everything that I was afraid of, and I still do that. And you go, okay, well I have this experience and I know this about myself. I know what I'm good at, I know what I'm bad at, I know what I like, I know what I don't like. It also helps build your maturity. Like you're basically just like a more whole and balanced person, that you know who you are and what you're about, and it's that knowledge that builds the kind of inner confidence. So I ended up basically just figuring out, like, okay, anything that's like art or performance or anything like that, I can just try it and be fairly decent at it, just like right off the bat. Anything that I actually invest myself in, I could probably get better in. But there hasn't been a whole lot that really called me that I felt passionate about. I'm going to keep doing this thing. So, more of the areas that I spent more of my time on were trying to balance myself out on those areas where I wasn't so good. Where I looked at it and was like, okay, I really stink at doing like math and mechanics and anything physical or technological or anything like that. Just doesn't make a whole lot of sense to me. And so I kind of have to focus on developing those areas and those skill sets to make myself better at them. As well as when I enjoy doing something else, I still want to try doing more, or like something that's a necessary life skill, like cooking. Cooking came pretty easily to me, but there's sometimes I'm fairly experimental in the kitchen. There's sometimes when I still, mess a dish up and just make it like terrible and disgusting. I'm like, okay, I'll learn from that experience and do something different next time. So like trying different, like kind of out there recipes and stuff like that. But that's like a life skill. So I'm kind of like, okay, I still want to develop and learn this area because it's something I need to do. But like mechanical stuff like that is also a life skill that's needed for basically just, whatever, getting through the day, trying to make it on your own. That's been another one of the big issues for me, is just the fact that I've spent so much of my life alone has put me into that position of I kind of need to learn how to do everything for myself, like be a strong, independent person. So that also developed in me like a lot of self-confidence that I figured out, and this is where I was talking about knowing yourself and having an honest self-assessment comes from, that I could look at one category and say, okay, creative intelligence. I have a naturally extremely high creative intelligence I'm just gifted with, and so anything I do in that area, I'm already just going to be decent at it if it's like my first time trying, and then if I keep practicing and working on it, I'll get better. And like STEM, science, technology, engineering, mathematics, whatever, I suck at it. It makes no sense to me. But it'll just take a lot more work and be a lot harder and longer to get to a better place. And so having that mindset, basically growth mindset, and knowing what I'm good at, what I'm not good at, what I like, what I don't like, and knowing I can always practice and improve myself and get better and become more well-balanced and able to care for myself. Basically competency, like I was talking about earlier, that I have really high competency and a high trust in my ability to build my competencies in order to better take care of myself. That gives me a lot of self-confidence and the kind of inner confidence. But I still get those doubts, and that's kind of where I was talking about earlier, the the imposter syndrome comes in, because a lot of it is, and you hear a lot of when you go into this topic about external validation versus internal validation. And I think on some level we all still crave the external validation. Like, we want to hear somebody say, like, you're doing a good job and you're doing it right and you know what you're doing. But the internal validation is a lot of people would say the more important one, because basically you can know you're good at something, you can know you're smart and all that, and you can still have like that voice of self-doubt there. And especially like in my situation, where people have gone through similar, maybe different situations where they had like that similar kind of growth experience from going from this place of I had no confidence or self-esteem in myself at all. I kind of like grew up like bullied and picked on and made fun of all the time, and I didn't really know like a whole lot about myself. Like, I was kind of like not sheltered, not really, but in a way, yes, I was. And so I just didn't have a whole lot of life experience. I didn't know, I hadn't tried things. I didn't know anything about the world or myself or anything, and so everything was just kind of brand new to me when I was younger, like my whole 20s basically, especially. Everything was just a learning experience, a new experience for me. And I kind of, like I said, I kind of got used to facing my fear. I wouldn't say conquering it, I wouldn't say getting rid of it, but just having courage and going and doing things anyway, even though I was afraid. And learning that I actually enjoyed trying new experiences and learning new things. Like, it's an important part of my personality, my character. And so discovering that about myself and trying all these different things helped to shape like who I am as a person. And so I went from being this person who was totally inexperienced in life and just no confidence and no self-awareness to being very self-aware, very experienced, very confident in myself. And so going from one extreme to the other, I still get a lot of that inner talk telling me, like, this isn't real. You're a fake person, you don't know what you're doing, what are you doing here? And so that's where it kind of comes back to doing like affirmations and mantras, and people talk about that type of stuff a lot. Basically telling that voice to shut up. Like, it's not true. And I feel like that's more important than getting the external validation, because I've had people tell me, you could have people telling you you're awesome and still not believe it. And that's what I was talking about, the difference between knowing you're good at something and feeling like you're really good at it, and knowing in your heart, basically, who you are and what you're about, as opposed to just like seeing it on paper and feeling like it's not really real. But I feel like, honestly, to a certain extent, you need both the internal and the external, because I feel like on the flip side, you can also just keep telling yourself, like I do, like oh, you're really smart, you have all these great qualities, you're really good at these certain things, and then just not have anyone recognizing and appreciating you for what you're doing, and feeling like, oh, maybe I'm just lying to myself. Which comes back full circle again to the whole like faking it thing. Like, you don't want to rely on you're faking it. You want to know this is realistically, I am good at these things, and I know it, and I have the experience in order to build that confidence where it comes across as sincere and genuine, as opposed to just you're like a poser or whatever. Basically, that's the whole thing. That's everything I want to talk about. Like I said, sorry if I rambled a little bit. Hope I hit all the major points there like I was trying to. If you have any questions, comments, feedback, I'd appreciate it. Hope you tune in next time after I figure out the next topic I'm going to talk about. Thank you.